Welcome to the First Generation Glow Up Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Hodan E. On this podcast, we'll be talking about our experiences overcoming the struggles as a first generation East African growing up in the West, with lessons learned, curated discussions, and many laughs along the way. The glow up is real. Started from the bottom, now we are here. So, in this episode, we will be having a candid conversation with my brothers about identity formation. So, a slight humble brag, they are both well adjusted, young, educated professionals who have navigated life as a first generation successfully thus far. Liban and Amde, let's talk. What is the hardest part in walking the line between two cultures so far for you? And I would say, particularly, let's focus on your college years. What do you think was the hardest part of being Somali and being American at the same time?
One of the hardest parts about being Somali and American for me was that there's a different life at home than there is outside the home.
True.
This doesn't just start in college. This really actually started in elementary school.
But when do you think it was the hardest, actually? Do you think it was hardest when you were in college, or do you think it was hardest when you were really young trying to formulate sort of who you are within this landscape?
It was truly and utterly the hardest, I believe, in the later middle school years and the early high school years.
Yeah.
Because these are like the times where I think people get to know who they are.
True.
And they're really developing who they are. So like the early teen years, these are the times where a lot of kids and people that we know would, try to go and, try to just rebel.
Yeah.
And they would be rebelling and doing things whatever that they wanted to do in order to rebel. But for me and other first generation, whether it's Somali or any first generations, we would think to ourselves, oh man, I want to do what my friends are doing. But the only problem would be that we would have a set of rules that we would have to go by back home. So when everybody was saying, hey, we're going to the bathroom right now, some guy said they want to try to smoke a cigarette. As a first generation Somali, my mom found out about that. She would just throw herself on the floor and start rolling around and screaming. So for me, I said, whoa, that's something that I cannot do.
Yeah.
So for me, it's I could rebel other ways. Like for example, like my mom would drop me off at the school bus, and I would pull out 2 rubber bands from my pocket and a dog chain. So right when my mom drove off after dropping me off at the school bus,
you would cuff your pants.
Yeah, I would cuff my pants, put 2 rubber bands on my pants, and throw the dog chain on just so I can be fly and just feel good.
Yeah.
But my mom ever sees me with those dog chains and all that, she'll say, "Oh my God, my son has become Americanized." So I think it was really that yeah,
Gangsta.
yeah, like just I feel like it's more so that was kind of really tough because there's kind of like constraints. It's like you're a caged bird in terms of how you can express yourself in those young years.
So with that being said, you talked about this term of somebody being a caged bird. And oftentimes in that type of condition, people often want to be free. And freedom, in a lot of people's minds, means doing everything you're told not to do. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so do you think that as a first generation American and having parents that grew up in a totally different culture, you really did feel like a caged bird, like growing up?
Yeah, because you have to basically look at 2 different identities. So you're Somali and you're American. You have to look at both of these identities and try to make both of those identities happy, which is not easy.
No.
It's not easy being an American and wanting to go to school and be like all the other Americans and do what everybody else is doing. But what happens is when that contradicts or goes against what it means for me to be Somali, then that's where the cognitive dissonance comes into play. And then that's when it's kind of like what I like to term as a mental war. So it's like you're a young kid in a mental war. Should I do this? Should I do that? And that's mentally taxing on somebody who's 12, 11, 13 years old. And luckily for me, it was something where I was able to go through that more so late middle school and high school. So by the time I was in college, I was kind of already deep rooted in who I was.
And you've already formed your identity as a Somali American.
Yes.
Okay, so the same question is for you, Amde. What do you think was the hardest thing between juggling 2 different cultures? And when do you think you actually went through the hardest part of that journey?
That's a great question, Doc. So, definitely wasn't putting any rubber bands on my on my jeans or putting a dog tag on. By the way, you were showing your age on that, man. OG
Keep that quiet, man. Keep that quiet.
Shout out to all of our, 90s, early 90s babies, late 80s babies. I see y'all.
Yeah, but like the hardest part for me, I don't know, cause I feel like I never had like a strong urge to rebel or anything like that. I don't think I ever went through a phase where I was like really just trying to go purely to the American side. Like growing up in the middle school, high school years, I liked sports.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing really wrong with that. I mean, the only things that got in the way was who I was hanging out with.
Mm-hmm.
Because my folks didn't really like me hanging out with certain Americans because they thought they were going to be bad influences on me. If I was getting bad grades, they may not. They may think it's someone else's fault. If I was doing some wrong things, they may think it was somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
I mean, but in reality, maybe I was just curious. Maybe I was just it was on me. A lot of times, first generation parents, they don't want to accept it. Maybe it's their kid who's
Maybe
responsible.
that their kid is the thought leader
Exactly.
in actually doing these things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I like shoes getting fresh.
Yeah.
So I hung out with some people who may not have been the best influences at times.
Yeah.
People who like to get money through, selling shoes and kicks and getting fresh and stuff like that. I mean, maybe listening to some type of rap music and stuff, but I don't know. It was never really. I never really felt too much at odds. But I know a lot of people have.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that your parents supported you buying expensive shoes, and they supported you listening to rap music with a lot of curse words and stuff?
No, but like for my folks, they well, first of all, I definitely hid the rap music with curse words.
Okay.
I definitely was not playing that anywhere in the house. Like maybe on my headphones, but that's it.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to the other stuff, like playing ball or buying expensive stuff, and they just thought it was just a waste of time, a waste of money, but they weren't that strict. So it was, I don't know, I didn't feel that much at odds, but that was basically how it was for me in the middle school, high school years.
Yes.
But one thing I will say is, we'll get into that later.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like
so then I have another question, and I think this is a good one. You both are well adjusted, and that's really the reason why I put you onto this first episode. I really think that oftentimes you find that when there is an identity crisis, that people really go on this self-destructive route, where really it's not even about rebelling against their parents. It's not even rebelling against any other person. It's really a very self-destructive mechanism that goes on within the person, in which they are so torn about who they are that they just go on a rampage, and that rampage can lead to alcoholism, can lead to drug abuse, can lead to all sorts of things that make people fall behind on in terms of with their classmates or just with their culture in general, right? Because your culture has a certain timeline associated with it. There's things that you should be doing at a certain age, right? And that's another topic that we'll get to later on in this discussion about first generation thought leaders. It's like that timeline that was given to us, that parents say you should be doing this at this age and this at this age, is absolutely arbitrary when you are a first generation person and you're also dealing with other timelines that this society imposes. So I have a question. What do you think was your sort of saving grace in terms of your awareness and consciousness of what's right and wrong when the environment is so opposite to what you feel at home? So what do you think helped guide you really on the straight path during those hard years where you're trying to formulate your identity?
I believe what helped me and guided me was having a good group of friends.
Yeah.
So I implore and urge any young person to understand that you are basically who your friends are.
True.
And me having a good group of friends, like my brother Amde here and a lot of my other brothers, we stuck together and said, hey, let's do this together.
The right way, right?
Yes.
Did you hold each other accountable throughout those years? So if somebody was falling off for some reason, was there checks and balances within your group that you can reel the person back in and be like, you know what, this is not the right thing to be doing?
It wasn't exactly about
Our friend culture was one that if you do something wild, like, yo man, I'm about to be out here getting pilled, drinking, or if you're out here smoking, or just I'm out here failing all my classes, it just wasn't accepted. So I think deep down at the end of the day, we would feel a sense of embarrassment doing things like that in front of our friends, or even doing that in general. Like, man, this is not me. Because like Hodan was saying the other day, you know, she feels and I feel, I'm pretty sure Liban feels too, that acceptance is the root of all of it.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be accepted, especially at a young age. And like Liban was saying, if your friend groups stand for some good values or morals, you're going to be seeking acceptance from only good things.
Absolutely,
But,
an
but
affirmation.
but the thing is, it's not only conscience. It's not only a conscious decision. Hey, let me hold you accountable, because we're talking about years where our brains were still growing. We're still kids. Yeah. It's more so just being around good people. Yeah. You don't get bad thoughts. Everybody has ideas of wanting to rebel and doing bad things. Yeah. But the thing is, if as a kid or as a teenager you're able to be around people who are really not doing that, the thing is, it just won't come to your mind as often. So if it was going to come to your mind a lot of times, like 60% of the time, without it, you're around some good people, it may come to your mind 20% of the time. Mm-hmm. No 13-year-old is holding another 13-year-old accountable. Hey, did you make sure you attended all 7 of your periods in the 9th grade? Yeah. No, it's more so, my friend is going to all 7 periods as a 9th grader.
So I should go.
I should go, and we can hang out later. Yeah. We can go play basketball later. We can go to the rec center later.
Yeah. So I have a question, though. Quick question. You say it's really about picking a good group of friends. How does someone start the process of picking good friends? Let's say you grew up in the hood, right? And all your friends are doing nonsense. How are you supposed to, where does it start? You know what I mean?
I believe it starts with having a hobby that you do that's not just based on your friends being based on just where you're from or them living in the same floor as you. Yeah. I believe it's more so saying, hey, I play basketball or I play soccer or I have a passion that's outside of just the regular life, and basically building your friend group based on that, so that you can then look and say, okay, I have a group of friends, we met through track and field or we met through basketball. And I feel like if these people are your friends, I feel like these are friends that you chose. More or less, the friends in your neighborhood are people that you grew up with. So I think that's more so family. Like if you're somebody who grew up in an impoverished area, you have basically the people that you were living around in those areas. These people are more so like your family. I don't even consider those friends. I think friends are more so people that you went
that you
and
chose.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that your environment doesn't directly indicate and tell you this is the type of person that you will become, nor does it tell you who you will befriend. That your friendships are the people that you choose, not so who you are around, is what you're saying.
Yes.
But that takes a certain amount of intellectual guidance.
It just takes curiosity, which I feel like all kids are curious.
They are curious.
All kids are curious about, want to try new things, want to try. But the thing is, they're usually sometimes trying new things in bad ways, trying to do bad things, just because they're looking for novel stimuli. Yeah. Whereas I believe that they need to be exposed, and if they don't have parents or their parents are overwhelmed, they need to expose themselves to this novel stimuli by saying, hey, let me go try to do this. I'm feeling bored. Let me
through activities.
Through activities, yeah.
Finding hobbies and actually enrolling.
And yes, there needs to be more activities there.
Let me ask you guys something.
Yeah.
So,
like that.
So when I think of this great advice, I feel like it's something I want to make sure happens with my kids in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah.
But one thing I will say is, I feel like this is more of something that is good advice for like a parent, because I don't know, maybe you guys know, but I don't know if a middle school or high school kid is conscious enough to, take this advice and say, hey, because in order to take this advice, you need to really be trying to, I guess, like find yourself and formulate your values, your morals.
Yes.
This is all stuff that, cool, you could tell somebody older who's already made the conscious decision to say, hey, this is the type of person I want to be. I need to reflect on it, and I need to make changes in my life in order to do so. I feel like the middle school and high schoolers, they're not that conscious. They're just going to say, hey, I like playing ball. I'm just going to hoop, and whoever I can get cool with, or whoever is cool, whoever is accepting me, I'm going to rock with whatever they're doing. I feel like this is stuff that I guess parents need to, what you guys were saying is things parents need to hear to
definitely,
to
yes,
guide their kids to say, hey, honestly, I think this is, the responsibility falls on the parents.
It always falls on the parents.
But that's why it's hard for the first generation, because our parents, I guess it's not in their culture to say, hey, we
we're gonna go enroll you in this program so you can make
exactly.
the right type of friends and do the
Exactly. Cause,
and kind of curate your life in that way.
in their
Yeah.
countries, nobody was off the pack and allowed, and nobody was on the craziness. You know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't, So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like when we have kids, inshallah, one day, it'll be much easier because we understand all the pitfalls and all the different temptations. So we can very easily help the kids maneuver to find the best friend groups, and hopefully that friend group who they spend 8 hours or plus of their day with, it takes them to only to good and not to bad.
But you see, I don't want to put all the blame on the parents because I believe a lot of, like most immigrant parents
are well intending.
Not only well intending, but I believe that those immigrant parents are very overwhelmed. They're dealing with a lot of stuff. They're working odd jobs. They're doing whatever they have to do to make ends meet because they came to this country, like down 50 on the scoreboard. Yeah. And they have to work their way back. And I believe that the thing is, I believe it's more so the community. This is where the community aspect comes in. Because if the parent is overwhelmed working a lot of hours, these kids need to have a community. A community that they can go to where there's like-minded people, also first generation, also other first generation kids that they can have a good time with. And I think that's more so, the onus is more so on us first generations to
especially
create
as
these
older
activities.
Ones to do a lot of curating
for the youth.
Yes, for the youth, exactly, and create these programs for them.
But here's the thing though, there's a lot of people that do that though. You will find that people are making all this money.
I don't know any.
Well, shoot, I've seen organizations around the country that are focused on youth, at risk youth, how to get them off the streets, how to get them engaged.
I've seen a lot
they
too.
make a lot of money off of these initiatives, and yet they themselves don't fully understand what it's like to be first generation. Some of the leaders in these organizations are not first generation themselves.
Like white people doing it.
And that's not even white people. It's people that were much older, right? Either came directly from the country themselves, so our immigrants themselves, right? And they, I'm not saying, a caveat, I'm not saying it's all at-risk youth programs, but if you're a 50-year-old and you're leading at-risk youth program, and you yourself don't even fully went through those things.
The thing is, they're well-intentioned. It's just that they don't understand. It's on us first generations.
Yeah.
They were born and raised and grew up in Somalia or in any other first generation, in any other country. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that they have well intentions, but they don't understand what it means, so they can't relate to the kids. Them even taking their time out
to create these organizations.
Yeah, any of the youth leaders who wanted to help the youth and were basically community organizers. For me growing up, I have a huge appreciation for them because they gave me their time. They helped set up basketball events.
True.
They set up Somali Independence Day events. We would go and have a good time where they didn't have to do that. They have full-time jobs. And I only started kind of seeing this when I grew up and I went and got a full-time job. And I started realizing, wow, I got to have a full-time job and I got to spend time with my family and I have school. I said, wow, this is a lot of stuff. So I only, as I grew up, started understanding more so, hey, even putting any time that they put in was a big blessing. But the thing is now that us first generations are old, 25 and up, and even 21 and up, it's our time to get back to the community and look at our whole community and say, you know what can we do? Because a kid would rather listen to what I have to say as a young Somali man than they'll have to say it as an older Somali gentleman.
Listening to one of their uncles or somebody else in the family.
Because I've been through all the stuff that they're going through.
Yeah.
I went to college. I was living in a dorm. I can talk to them and speak to them a way that the older Somali individuals can't. Or any other type, from any other country. It could be Ethiopian or whatever.
So I have a question, y'all, and this is mostly just coming to both of y'all. And I keep saying I have a question. I have plenty of questions throughout this podcast. How much do you think your identity and the formation of your identity was based off of your need for acceptance?
I think it was actually a great amount because my need for acceptance is what had me as a young teenage kid doing all the things that I was doing because I didn't feel that I was American enough, nor did I feel like I was Somali enough due to me being born and raised in the United States. So it was pretty tough, and I wanted to be accepted.
Who did you mostly
want
to get? So in real talk, who did you really seek the acceptance of?
I seek the acceptance of the United States, the Americans that I grew up with, because these are the people that I'm around all the time. These are the people that I grew up with. So I of course I was different, but I also was a lot like them, because like you said, I wanted to be accepted by them. So I would do whatever I had to do, but I had a certain limit that I would say, and this is where the cognitive dissonance and the mental warfare comes into play, because
you would have to stop at a certain point.
I would have to stop at a certain point. So like, I'll give you a story.
And what do you think helped you, like, so you're saying that this awareness that you have to stop, right?
Yeah.
That was embedded in you by
my
mom and
parents.
dad?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. It had to be my parents.
And that really was our parents that were like, okay, you can do up to so much, and then you have to stop at a certain place. And then that's where your, I guess, Somali identity kicks in. And you say, well, this is beyond my scope. This is not where I am. This is not who I am. I can't engage in this.
And even if I wanted to transgress those bounds, they would bring me back very quickly.
Yes.
So if I would go to a school event, and my mom would be calling me immediately if I was at a high school football game, and I would say some guys are hanging out after Hoya, mom. I want to hang out with them. And she said, no, you need to get home right now.
Just watching the game was enough.
Yeah, what she said, you're lucky I even let you go watch a game. I'm like, we're just talking about football.
Nah.
Come on, this is just football. Big skin. Like, that can't just be thrown around. But that's what I'm saying. So I feel like that kind of put me in a kind of, it made me stay within those bounds. But then at the same time,
but that was also respect that you had, though. And here's a lot of what people say. But my parents
still gave me the opportunity to still go to these events.
Yes.
And I feel like that's what opened me, and that's what kind of helped me out. Because I had other friends I grew up with who weren't being allowed to go to these events.
At all.
And the second that we got to college, they immediately, because they thought themselves, I finally have freedom now. But for me,
that's that caged bird that you were talking about earlier, in which you never fully felt like you were a bird in a cage. You felt like you had constraints that you worked within, but you could always just sort of fly and go with the flow within boundaries, right?
Yeah, it's like somebody walking their dog. Yeah. Like somebody, if you see somebody in the park with a dog that's not on a leash, that dog, they'll only say, just stay in this area. Whenever they see their dog kind of like going out into the forest, they'll start whistling and stuff, saying, get back over here. Get back over here, Roger. But still, you still have to let that dog go out and explore.
But the dog is also trained. And that is what I think the point that oftentimes is
in
lost.
No way am I comparing myself to a dog.
I know. No, honestly, there's a lot of training that needs to happen. And one of the things that I think occurs is like all of our parents were in survival mode, right? And so when you're in survival mode, you're thinking about how are these kids going to eat? How are these kids going to go to school? Where are they sleeping? What type of clothes? Like, do they have clothes every season to wear? Transportation. All of the basic needs is what survival mindset parents are on. But then at a certain point, you're no longer just trying to survive. Surviving is a period in life. And if you do what's supposed to be done throughout your survival stage and you put forth the effort, you should move over to stability. So you're no longer just surviving, you are now stable enough to consider thriving, right? There's levels to these things. And so when you are in a perpetual state of mental survival mode, it's the time that's needed to take care of your kids' psychological growth falls to the wayside, right? And not to say, like, people can say in the comments or something that, my parents have always been in survival mode. They've always had these conditions that made it so that they could never really be stabilized. America, if you live in the United States, there is a lot of resources available to bring you from survival to stability. There's plenty of resources available that are public resources to bring you from surviving to stability. Once you are now stable, the onus is on the parent, the onus is on the first generation child to move from survival, from stability to thriving. And that is where I think a lot of kids don't recognize how much struggle went into getting from survival to stability, and then they don't even do the work that's needed to be done to start thriving. They then revert back to survival mode themselves as if they need to do that. Yeah, because, you don't need to do that.
Yes, because our parents were surviving so that we could have stability.
Yes.
And I'll repeat that again. Our parents, as first generation, were surviving in order for us to have stability. So
So
our
you think our
stability.
parents? So you're saying that our parents never got to a place where they were stable,
I
or
think
most most immigrant parents,
I think the majority of first
or most
generation
immigrant parents.
for most immigrant parents, they don't ever get to a place of stability. They look to their kids to be their stability.
Good
not
point.
not only just as monetary, but also achievements, graduating from high school,
Yes, that's a good
going to
point.
college.
Well,
Yeah.
let me just one
Go
more
ahead.
thing, because I don't think that just because I think there are very low cost or low effort ways to make sure your kids are on the right path, even if you can't spend that much time with them, right? Even if you
Okay.
can't
So what do
spend
you think are some?
education?
Yeah.
If the parent is educated on the things we were just talking about for the last 30 minutes, then they could go to work 10, 12 hours a day, and but have put in the work a little bit before finding a community and making sure their kids are always left with good companions and like
Yeah.
people of good influences. So they don't have to always micromanage them like parents who are already in stable positions can. Because the ones in stable conditions can provide a lot more resources to make sure their kids are on the right path. But at the same time, you know, I guess making sure the kid is cool with being at like the masjid, or the being cool, making sure the kid is cool with hanging out with his cousins who are on the right path, or making sure his kid is cool with going to some nice soccer team or something that where he can spend time with around people with good influences. I don't know. I don't think you have to be in well-off position, because there's so many people I know who were on the right path but didn't grow up with money. You know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
do you guys know other ways, like low cost or low resource ways to?
The thing is, I would have to disagree with that, because I believe that if you have an immigrant parent who's struggling financially and time wise due to having to work all these jobs and do all that, or even if we're not talking about time or finance, we just talk about the mental stress of being an immigrant and being impoverished. I believe that in these type of circumstances, it's hard for the parent to to have that energy to say, hey, they're doing the best that they can, and now I feel like it's more so on
the kid, right?
No, on the new young Somali parents or young immigrant parents to say, now that we are first generation, that we should be able to in our mind understand and see that, hey, we seen all these pitfalls. Now let's brainstorm effective ways to parent that would be slightly different than the ways our parents did it, in order, because they were in survival mode.
Yeah.
Our parents, it's not that them, our moms, they were in survival mode, and that's what had them always working, always doing something. And I believe that now, I believe that now it's for us to change that guard and say, let's do it, because since, like I said before, since our parents were surviving, we are now in a place that we're stable. And I believe that stability, we have the options to now thrive, as Holden was saying earlier. And if you're thriving and you have technology and the internet, I believe that there's so much that you can do in order, when it comes down to learning things. Like people would see this as like people would see this as not a big deal, but you can even Google how to be a parent online. Like there's so much you could do that wasn't available in the 1980s. How to be a more
efficient,
in the
productive
90s. There's
parent.
so many books you can read.
But but the thing is, most immigrant parents, in their culture, it's hard to communicate these type of things effectively to them. I mean, I can't imagine a first generation or.
So I have a question real quick saying about that. What do you think was some of the hardest things to talk to your parents about? Growing up, what were some of the things that you thought were super hard to talk to your parents about, that really was in those early years where you were really struggling living between two different identities?
I believe that some of the hardest things that I would have to talk to my parents about, that I didn't want to and tried my hardest to avoid, were like, what I wanted to do in life, as in like what I wanted to be. I believe that, as immigrant parents, and most immigrants can relate to this, our parents want us to have certain careers. But I believe that telling your parents that you have an interest in something that's not one of those traditional fields, causes a lot of problems in the house and a lot of disappointment that immigrant parents place on, their kids, because they want their kids to fulfill the dreams that they didn't have a chance to, fulfill due to them coming from these third world countries that, didn't have stable governments. And I believe that hard conversations going to be had,
about career choices
about
and
career
path,
choices.
and but then
Because you can't stifle a kid and tell him or her that they have to be in a certain field. I feel like that would, kind of interrupt their creativity, mess up their passion. And I believe that if you're not leading a passionate life, I don't think there's no life to lead.
Yeah,
and I believe
see
that.
your point.
But it has to be your passions. It can't be your parents' passions. Your parents can help guide you. They can help you. But I believe more so it's something that you're gonna have to come to grips with. And I know all of us here have had to have those tough conversations and with our parents about this.
But you know what I think, bro? Like, I think that even like this conversation and the one we just had before, it all has to do with education.
Yeah.
If there can be like a first generation person from the same country but who grew up here to explain to the parents things like, hey, your kid can still be successful not as an engineer, lawyer, or a doctor or something like that. They can still be successful with XYZ major and get a job at XYZ business or XYZ consultant firm. Just to kind of help break down the rigid ideas that they have about what it means to be successful in America, and also even from the last conversation we're having somebody who they trust, like a first generation who's successful, who they can trust, tell the parents like, hey, you know what, these are the best ways to help your kids avoid bad influences, this place, that place, this place, that. I feel like they just need someone to get them.
The parents need
a lot more information.
The parents need consulting.
Consulting.
Exactly. And who's gonna consult them? Us.
We're the only
yes, there's nobody else. That's why this first generation is the most important generation, because we are the ones who are basically going to be able to consult all these parents, and also when we become parents, help create these communities.
It's like when they go to a doctor and there's an advocate who basically says, yo, I'm going to explain to you exactly what the doctor means. He's speaking this foreign language to you and all the stuff that you may not understand. I'm going to break it down in simple terms and tell you step by step what you need to do. It's just like that. Continue, bro.
Well, that's a really good point about education. I want to circle back around to something about friends. To be honest with you, making friends is not easy for anybody, right? It's a hard thing when you're growing up. And you're not even fully sure of yourself, and your confidence is like on tilt, and you're kind of trying to figure out who you are, what you're about, and really your confidence is shot on an everyday basis. Making friends is not easy. I think you all can attest to that. And it's even harder when you're trying to formulate friendships within those boundaries that we spoke about. Like, I can say verbatim, I was never allowed to go to sleepovers, period. Right?
Yep.
That was a big thing.
Me too.
Yeah. And you know this. And FYI, this is my brother in this podcast. So neither one of us, he, the boy, and me, the girl, neither one of us were allowed to go to anybody's house and sleep over growing up. And so one of the things that...
I was getting lit at those sleepovers, man.
Huh?
I was getting lit at those sleepovers.
You were?
Some video games till 4 in the morning.
But like... One of the things that I think I want to circle back around to is confidence building as a first generation anything, and particularly we're speaking right now about first generation East Africans, and building your confidence into who you are. At every turn, people are trying to bring you down. If you don't drink alcohol, you have peer pressure that's around saying, oh, you should come and get lit with us. You should drink. It's no biggie. Even though it's against your faith and it's not something that's prevalent within your culture, right? You have when it comes to confidence, people will say, "Oh, you gotta just be the loudest, the most ignorant guy in the room in order to appear confident," and that's what the thing is currently, right? And so, confidence and the formation of confidence. How do you think you built your confidence over the years? What were the key components in confidence building for you? And really, do you think that your dual identity and you walking those paths helped build your confidence or hindered your confidence?
So I believe what helped me build my confidence was I would have to give a large, significant contribution to my parents.
True.
Because they always told me that I was different. So if I try to come and tell them I just want to do what all my classmates are doing, they'll tell me, "No, you're Somali, you're different," you know. Or if I told my dad, "Hey, my teacher said that I failed this exam and that I'm just not smart and that like I need to be removed from this math class," he would tell me, "No, no, you're not. Don't listen to them. You're not like all of them. You come from a good family. You're smart." And I feel like that helped me a lot. Helped me to just believe it, because I feel like if your parents are telling you that you're smart, I feel like these are the people who brought you into this world. I feel like that gives you the utmost confidence, and you as my sister or like my other brothers telling me that I can do it, I believe that helped me a lot, and that built my confidence greatly. And I also believe what else built my confidence is a dual identity, because even if I didn't believe what my parents were saying, I always felt like I was somebody who wasn't your average person.
Yeah.
So I kind of accepted my differences from the society and how it's different from people. I accepted that.
And that was like something that built your confidence, that you felt
back
like
when it wasn't cool to be different.
Yeah.
Because I come from the era where they would say, "Hey, you're an African booty scratcher." I come from that era. I don't come from the era of, "Hey, it's cool to listen to Afro beats and I don't come from that era. I come from the era, if you're not wearing some Jordans and you're not wearing Sean John and Rockaware and a 4XL t-shirt,
two 4XL t-shirts on top of each other.
If you're not wearing any of that, then you're not cool at all. Like, it's not cool to be different. Nowadays, you see people just walking outside and, you see people in downtown walking around with African dress.
Yeah.
Like, you
see white girls wearing African prints.
Yeah,
like talk about cultural appropriation, but that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, so it's like, I come from that era. So I was able to understand, hey, man, I used my differences and how I stood out. And I said, hey,
that's my power.
That's my power. My curly hair, all of that. That's who I am.
Pride.
Yeah, it's my pride. It's my pride. If I have a beard, then I'm Muslim. That's my pride.
I'm not like y'all.
Yes.
And that and really that it could go two ways, like you said. I'm not like y'all could be like, "Oh my God, I'm not like y'all. I'm like, I need to be like you. Let me go kiss your, behind." Yeah, but it's so hard. So what do you think? Your dual identity, how much of it do you think influenced the building of your culture? Building of your confidence? Do you think at any points you being Ethiopian American made you less confident in any way? And also for you, Amde, it's even more particular because you have a big community here in the DNV, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas in me and Liban don't. Mm-hmm. So how much do you think that has helped shape who you are today?
For me, I feel like since I grew up in an area with a lot of Africans and in general first generation Africans, mm-hmm. It was cool. Like, we just play soccer. We kind of have an understanding of a lot of things. We're not going to make fun of each other for not having Jordans or whatever all the time, So yeah, I mean, for me, most of the things Liban said, I could say I feel the same way. My parents always, one thing, I don't know if you guys know, is Ethiopians, they have a lot of pride. It might be a little too much at times. But, they're always trying to build you up. And
yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with everything Liban said. I would say I feel the same. But one thing I will say, a little different perspective, is in my life, when I became a lot more confident, is when I started to reflect on who I am and what I believe. And I started to become more conscious about my actions, mm-hmm. my belief system, what I stand for, what I'm willing to do, what I'm not willing to do.
And when do you think that happened for you, Amde?
That didn't come till college.
Yeah.
When I started to meet other free thinkers or people who were kind of putting me on to, you know, I don't know. I just feel like so in college in general, that's when you should be a little more reflective. I mean, you're by yourself. A lot of times you're in your dorm. A lot of times you don't have anyone there, so you can become a whole new person. Some people, they join organizations, they become completely different people. Sometimes it's for the better, sometimes for the worse. But when I sat down and figured all this stuff out for who I am and what I want to be and what I truly believe, that's when I became a lot more confident because if it was cool to do X, Y, Z, and I know I didn't stand for it, I wasn't as pressured or I didn't have that urge to do it as I may have back in the day when I was just a youngin in high school or middle school or something like that. Because I was like, yo, I know who I am, and I believe that this is right, and that's cool enough for me. And so, you know, I think it has to. Every person, once they're in college or once they're old enough to be conscious, they need to reflect and they need to make a conscious decision of who they are,
Who
what
they
they
want to
stand
be.
for,
Yeah.
who they want to be, and also consistently reflect.
Yes.
You know, because a lot of people they're running away from that. They don't want to look back at those crazy ass decisions that they made the weekend before at the party or a couple weeks ago when they had that falling out with their friend group. They don't want to break down. Yo, let me take responsibility for my actions. What did I do wrong? Is this who I want to be? Do I have any characteristics that I can work on? If you have that, if you grow and at least try, make an attempt to be reflective and try to work on yourself like that at an earlier age, like in college instead of when you're 30s. Most people, I think, do it, or maybe even never.
Never. I think that's often the case where that reflection never happens.
Exactly. Then I think you'll be straight in life. But you need humility, and you need someone to kind of urge you or put you onto this. Because I had someone kind of telling me, but I never really thought about this. You know, this whole thing. I would just living life, having fun, going to play basketball, going to the hoop with my boy, going to have a good time with my boy, going to the dining hall. We weren't thinking too consciously, going to class, that's it. But you need someone to put you on. You need to be humble enough and kind of confident enough to criticize yourself. I mean, some people, they have such low confidence that they can't even criticize themselves because, you know, they're like just in denial because I don't know why,
but you need, like you said, you need to go to college in order to meet those free thinkers that are also criticizing themselves, who are also being self-reflective. Then in your mind, you'll think, hey, this person's able to do it. It's not that bad. I can go back and look back and, you know, at what I've been doing or the life I'm living. I feel like every person should always audit themselves. I believe that, like, there should be like many times in a year where one just says, you know what, I'm gonna spend the next few hours or even the next day, you know, this whole afternoon, this evening, just auditing and looking back at my life and saying, you know what, let me see like what's been going on, because it's so easy to be on autopilot doing whatever you're doing, and so easy.
Wake up at 35 just a bum.
A bum.
Like,
but it's not
maybe not financially, maybe not other aspects, but you may have the maturity level of somebody 10, 20 years below you.
Oh yes.
I think the listeners want to know who you are a little bit.
Honestly, building confidence is one of the hardest things as a first generation female that is really trying to see who the hell you are in America, right? Because I'm not Somali enough, I'm not black enough, I'm not American enough, I'm not feminine enough, I'm not this enough. Women are criticized from here to California, literally, for every aspect of who they are. And when you are under constant pressure and scrutiny from your physical appearance to if you actually take on an intellectual journey, right? Where you're like, who are you? Like when you're in these science classes and you're the only black female, the only immigrant first generation in some of these classes, they're like, who are you? Like, how dare you come into this class with this type of vibes that you might catch? Yeah. One of the things that I've learned, honestly, is really what helps is like just being self-aware and conscious and taking the time to really be reflective.
How did you start becoming like that?
You know, how I became like that, honestly, is a lot of it had to do with social isolation. I'm not even going to front. Like, I spent a lot of time socially isolated. And some of it was like my brother said earlier, the constructs within the boundaries that I lived in. Growing up, there was just things I couldn't do, and I accepted them. That's the interesting thing. There's a lot of people who really do not accept the boundaries at all, and so they go through life just going like a million miles per hour against every single thing that's ever been told to them by anybody that cares and loves for them. You know. That cares and loves them. So what I found, honestly, is my love of self and how much I truly love myself and the love that I have for my parents and for the people that raised me. There was just things that I could not do. And so when I found that these are things that absolutely, it's really honestly, to keep it 100, I felt like a lot of that stuff was beneath me. And when I felt like it's beneath you, that it's not above, it's not something I strive to do, it's beneath me, then I was like, all right, this is beneath me. This ain't nothing that I'm interested in. And also, that led me to being somewhat socially isolated because unlike y'all, a lot of girls don't have hobbies. I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. It's rare that a girl is playing ball or playing soccer or attending anything. Either they're on the curve doing BS or they're socially isolated. There's some that actually do have hobbies, but it takes time to develop these hobbies as women because it's not sports oriented. And so
That's a completely different. I have so many.
yeah, there's so many questions about that. So it really like why girls are often pressed over guys is they ain't got nothing else to do. Let's keep it like totally honest. Like when you are focused on yourself, you're focused on your development, you're focused on your growth, you have hobbies, you will meet amazing women and guys through these endeavors. But if you ain't doing nothing, you're not about nothing, how are you ever going to meet anybody of substance? How are you going to build these circles? You're not playing soccer or basketball or track. You know what I mean? So women have it way harder than men when it comes to finding good friends.
And that's what can lead them into accepting peer pressure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because like I was saying, it was easy for me to find these hobbies that men do, like playing basketball and doing all that. But, that kind of gave me the time where, I was away, that kind of like shielded me from the BS.
Yeah.
Because I'm just, like, if I'm playing basketball 6 hours a day, what time, as a
when
kid.
When were you playing 6 hours?
A lot of my life.
See, like, there are a lot of girls who I think grew up with the right influences at home, and they thought that all the BS was beneath them at school, so they kind of ended up in a similar social isolation. But what I want to ask you is, how did you make that productive? How did you make that productive to the point where you're so successful in everything?
That's a very good question. Being loneliness can really do a couple of things. For some people, loneliness is debilitating, where they literally cannot do anything. They live in a sulken state. And then for other people, loneliness taps into optimism, where they're saying, if I do this and this and this, and I elevate my life, I will attract the right people along the way because I'm a better person and I do dope things and I'm cool as all whatever. You know what I mean? So when I am in a position where I'm glowing up, where I'm powerful, I will by virtue be meeting people that are in alignment with my wavelength. You know what I mean? I think so. Isolation really. And
was it natural for you to go that mindset? Was it just natural?
I think for me,
that's
of it.
That's a perfect mindset. I don't know how you got to that.
I think
that's not what most.
I don't think a lot of people think that way. I think a lot of people do a lot of self-destruction along the path to actualizing themselves. Some of them continue on that self-destruction for the rest of their lives, while others catch themselves. Honestly, I think a lot of it is spiritual for me. I have always believed that Allah is watching me at all times and wants the best for me. And I'm not trying to go really, too deep into that, but always knowing at the back of my mind that my life is a combination of my free will choices and my destiny. And it's a combination of the two. My entire life, up until the moment that I die, I have free choice and I have destiny. And as long as I put forth my concerned and best effort in terms of making the best choices within the constraints of my free will, then my destiny will be beautiful. I will have the things that I've always envisioned, or better, because Allah is the best of planners. But when you spend much of your life in a hopeless state, right? Where you say my social isolation is some kind of punishment, that the restrictions that my parents are giving me is so that I'm not as cool or not as hip, or I don't have these friends, or, you know, you live in a hopeless state. I mean, you will fall into anything, including drugs, including alcohol, including premarital affairs, including anything, and then ultimately depression and just, you know, and so I think that parents, yes, don't isolate your girls to the point where they lose their minds, right? If there's parents that are listeners, like when I say I was socially isolated, I could go to the movies. I chose to isolate myself from the nonsense. Yeah.
There's not a lot of girls on the same wave as you. Yeah. Right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And honestly, I think there needs to be more conversations like this one.